Thank you very much. Richard Clark and Tom Lyman join us in studio to talk about updates to the funeral policy in the Archdiocese of Boston. Guys, thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be with you, Jay.
So why don't we just start out, why did we have to have revisions? What prompted the revisions in the funeral policy?
Well, this is it's probably pastorally the most difficult and challenging of all pastoral responsibilities, of which there are many. So funeral needs some attention. It's been about 20 years, and there was some toying around with it about 10 years ago, and they didn't really want to go with that. It was a little too canonical. I think the direction it wanted to take was an update. There were a lot of good things in the old policy, but to update it, but also I think they were highlighted. In some ways, what's new is a bit of a pastoral emphasis. In fact, it's right in the first sentence, the very top of it. Father Jonathan Gaspar wrote a lot of the language that's in it. There were many of us on the program, but he kind of worded it, and it sets the tone right away that this is not the end. As Christians, we believe that we were created to have eternal life with God. That's the first sentence. That's the first paragraph. And it all follows through that. Music, it follows directly from that, and so many other things. And then there was a lot of other pragmatic issues. Priests are doing jobs. Now, 20 years ago, you didn't have priests in charge of collaboratives, 2, 3, 4 parishes. Priests are bishops in charge of parishes now, collaboratives. So you have something we're operating completely differently than we used to, and there are new practical challenges. So they're practical, and then there's also the pastoral aspect. And that really is like, it's time, and this is a good time for this.
Tom, you coordinate divine worship for the Archdiocese of Boston, which is an enormous responsibility. But where does the funeral liturgy fit into that in terms of the liturgical life of the church? It's got to be one of the more challenging moments, both for families and individuals, but also for priests and pastoral staff.
It definitely can be, because this is one of the things that everybody seeks. Everybody seeks the Catholic funeral mass, or many people do. And so we have people who come to us kind of from all different points on the faith journey or their experience in the church seeking a Catholic funeral. So we have to kind of meet people where they are when they come to us, but sometimes we have to help adjust some of their expectations about what a Catholic funeral mass includes. And so that includes, of course, supporting pastors in being able to celebrate the liturgy well.
Having a relationship, too, as a local pastor with funeral directors is a pretty important aspect of this, don't you feel?
Absolutely. Yeah, to be able to make well known to the funeral directors what are the guidelines, expectations, and policies, and what is the liturgy about? What does it entail?
What are some of the most frequently asked questions? Because I hear it all the time. So when one of my friends' parents or a relative, someone they love, passes away, they start giving me a million questions. What do you guys get as the most frequently asked questions?
Well, one of the most frequently asked questions that I get would be related to, can we have a special song at Mass? Mm-hmm. Or can we, what about cremation? I've had people call me saying, somebody said something about, keeping the remains, but I didn't think that was right. And I said, you're right, that's not right to keep, elements of that. And that's in the new policy, based on the more recent document on cremation from 2016 from the Vatican, which says essentially that cremation is permitted for Catholics. However, there is a right way and a less right way to do that. And that all remains need to have a dignified Christian burial, and that we can't be conserving the remains in mementos or memorabilia or in the home in some fashion, and certainly not ever scattering them on land, in the air, or at sea.
Richard, you're a fantastic musician, now the director of music at the cathedral. Loved ones get anxious about music, and Tom just mentioned it briefly. Can you give us some advice about how to deal with music and the funeral rite?
Yeah, again, this is probably, again, the most challenging aspects. We deal with weddings, we deal with funerals, and that is sort of directing. Tom said about what are your expectations. You may have those who, you have everybody on different walks of life coming from different experiences. Those who maybe have been regular parts of your parish, you have a different experience with that. Many people, they're not liturgy experts, and nor should they be. They're in grief, they're in pain, and the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that. If you can meet with them, which sometimes is impossible, but sometimes I've run through a slew of incredibly difficult funerals, tragic circumstances, young, very young, just very, very difficult stuff. You've got to meet with them, and they have things that are meaningful to them, which may or may not be appropriate, and that's understandable. So you have to acknowledge, we understand that this is meaningful to you, But we're doing something that's incredibly joyful. We're praying for them that they will become a member of the communion of saints. This is amazing, you know, where there's an American culture that has a shift on celebrating the life. We're doing something different. We've got the Eucharist at the center. Why is the Eucharist at the center? Because Christ is alive, Christ lives, and we share in that hope. So when you begin to begin a little bit of that, you have to have a lot of diplomacy. You have to have a lot of alternatives ready to go. Try this, let's look at this. One of the big things that I get universally is we want the funeral to be joyful. We don't want it to be depressing. Absolutely. That is one of the mandates. You're doing two things really musically. And there's comfort, which is a big deal, obviously, uplifting, but also to choose music that it puts Christ at the center and that we share in the expectation of resurrection. And the ancient traditions, the ancient Gregorian chants are no more joyful in their text than most anything you have today. Chant that I've sung at just about every single funeral for 30 years, with rare exception, I can count on my two hands, ones I didn't sing, In Paradisum. May the angels lead you into paradise, may the martyrs welcome you, no matter who you are. Angels, martyrs, leading you into the holy city, the new eternal Jerusalem. Then if that wasn't good enough, you've got the Chorus Angelorum, the choirs of angels. Wow, this is great. So this blows away celebrating your life. We are praying for your eternal life.
And it's all in the presentation.
Yeah.
Where can people find the policy?
On the Archdiocesan website, so if you Google Boston Catholic Divine Worship, you'll come to the Divine Worship webpage, and the funeral policy is marked off on there.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, guys. Very
Yeah.
much appreciated. And we're